Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Sam. We live in a world filled with so much information. We live in times where information, knowledge is in so much abundance. We have so many choices to make. We have so many decisions to make. We have so many options that are available to us. And sometimes this abundance and overflow of knowledge, of options, of choices has given rise to some form of anxiety. It has given rise to some form of feeling the pressure and the demand to be a certain type of person. It has given rise to what some of us could purely understand as mental illness. It has given rise or compromised our mental health. We have learned to live with so many voices, with so much information, so much knowledge, that we never really know what it is that we need to focus on. We've created a world where we struggle to silence the voices that no longer serve us. We struggle to reject the information that doesn't serve us. I have written a book called Mental Wealth. It is through my reflection that by design we are created as human beings with resources that enable us to silence, to shut down, and to change the things that no longer serve us. Mental wealth is realizing that we've got attributes in us created by God, the Creator, so that we are able to live in a world filled with so many things, but be able to make the choices that will be productive, progressive, and enable us to become people who dominate, subdue, and become successors in the earth. Mental wealth is not just a book. It's a product, it's a service, it's an experience, it's a journey. It's a way of me saying, how can I be of service to you as we walk and journey through the earth together? It's a call really to say, what is it that you have that can contribute to making this world a better place? What is it that already is in you? What are the experiences? What are the resources? What is the knowledge? What is your exposure? What's your environment that's different to mine that will help you shape the way you think, shape your behavior, so that we produce results that will impact this world in the positive? Mental wealth is a way of us accumulating resources. We accumulate knowledge, we accumulate experiences, and we become fully conscious and intentional when we experience things, when we venture into projects, and when we become communicators with other people. Mental wealth in the marketplace is such a crucial area where most of our mental health problems may be seen. This is because the marketplace is a place of exchange. It's a battlefield. It's a place where everyone comes and contends to show forth what they already possess in them. Whether it's skills, it's knowledge, it's degrees, it's exposure, it's talents, it's businesses. So we need to stand together and say, what is it that I have? What is the mental tenacity that I possess that will make me productive and make a change in the marketplace, and make a change in the relationships I'm part of, and make a change in the world which I exist in? In this project called Mental Wealth, I'm inviting you into a journey of exploring and reflection. A journey where you realize that you're not just a human being in a body. You're a spirit, you have a soul, and you walk the earth with your body, but informed by your spirit and your soul. And the way you invest in it, and you ensure that the resources that you already have, your personality, the way you think, the exposures that you have that position you differently to someone else, are the very resources of wealth that you need to present to make this place a better place, to make this world a better place.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle Program with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen right here on www.ourtv.network, also airing on Apple TV, Amazon Fire Stick, Tempo Television, and WSTX Radio Bloomberg out of the United States Virgin Islands. How are you this afternoon, Dr.?
Very well, thank you.
Outstanding.
Anxious for the campaign year to be over and hope it ends well.
Wow. And this is from someone who understands campaigning and understands the hurdles and dynamics of just getting through this season. Is there a particular reason you want to get through with the campaign season?
It's just very, very busy.
Very busy.
A lot of stuff going on, yeah.
Well, we are...
I wanted to say about the video that we just saw before our guest comes on that mental wealth for the marketplace really fit quite into the programming that we do here in the marketplace.
Absolutely. I mean, it's timely based on even what you just said in terms of being tired. It's timely because I think we spent pretty much the first half, a good portion of the first half of 2022 on our programs addressing mental health from youth to family to individuals, men, women, policy, health equity issues, particularly. I mean, it's just, we've covered the gamut, but we're so pleased to have our guest today coming all the way from South Africa. So we so appreciate Dr. Sam. And I'm just so excited to have you here to talk about that remarkable video. We just are so grateful. I just want to read a little bit of your bio because it's pretty exciting. And please correct me if I'm mispronouncing Dr. Sam Zunga Fidelis.
Yes, Fidelis.
Fantastic. Is an author, a transformational speaker, therapist, and a mentor. She is a University of Cape Town graduate with a degree from Mancosa. In addition, she has a diploma in mental health, and she is a cognitive behavioral health therapist. She is a personal practitioner and has a private practice called Enable Health, which focuses on the medical legal matters, functional capacity, evaluations, mental health, and corporate wellness. So that's where that marketplace comes in. So important. She is the founder of Health Wealth Forum, which will discuss a platform to educate the community about public health issues, mentor health students and professionals. And we're very excited to also talk about your book. You are the author of, it said on the promo, Mental Wealth, which has given birth to the Mental Health Foundation, which focuses on mental health services and empowering people to become allies of health and support. I love the word allies of health because that's exactly what we need to become. And we're just so excited that you're going to join our family of hosts this month with your own program right here on Our TV network, broadcasting live from South Africa, which is beautiful. I've been there and traveled throughout the country to see many, many, many points of interest. So welcome to our program, Dr. Sam. We have a whole lot to pack up and deliver.
Thank you so much for having me.
All of our listeners will really be happy to have you. So welcome.
Yes. Well,
thank you so much.
Well, why don't we start with, your why? Everyone has a why when they come to the subject of mental health. And and then they put into practice that why in various
Mm.
in the area of a non-clinician, circling all the areas of administration, management, executive leadership, program development. Dr. Christensen clearly in overseeing large healthcare systems in the Virgin Island, and then moving into the legislative realm to impact a variety of critical and long-term legislation and representing the U.S. Virgin Islands as well. Dr. Sam, what is your why for working in this field?
Well, my wife for working in this field, my mom was diagnosed with depression. And in our community, a lot of people didn't really know much about any mental health illnesses. Even the community setup, whether it was church, whether it was friends, whether it was even her workplace, they weren't really equipped and they weren't really knowledgeable about how to manage and how can someone like this navigate. And the effect that it had on our family, I mean, on my father, on my brothers, it was really detrimental, to the extent that some of my brothers, they abuse alcohol, they're on drugs. So it was just a burden of so many things that came from, I wouldn't want to say just one thing, but I think mental health was really one of them, and not knowing how to identify and how to help someone with it, who's such a crucial part of the family and such a crucial part of a support structure. And then, it really made me seek out for solutions, for help, and really help me identify that, when someone has a mental illness, there's so many support structures that are affected. There's so many people that are affected that are forming part of an organization or support body for this individual. And in our country, really, when it comes to the healthcare system, our mental health services are really not that great. And I really had to do some research and seek out what are other people doing in other countries? What could be done? What could I learn? What could I draw from to really create something that will help communities, church communities, that will even help our corporates that are so shy to really seek out help when it comes to mental health? I think it's such a big why, because it affected my whole family, it affected me, it affected the community, it affected the church. So it even affected, my mother's workplace. So it's a huge why. And I really had to do something to start in terms of educating, in terms of sharing knowledge, in terms of being a resource structure. And when I saw that, I realized that not one person can do this. Even our health system alone cannot. So people need to be allies of therapy and centers where support can be given. So when we train people to identify and to counsel and to be equipped for such, we're creating a community which is not afraid to speak out, which is not afraid to seek help, which is not afraid to really be bold, even when they have some form of mental illness.
Wow. That's so critical. The piece that you talked about, not being afraid to speak out, is really a seismic cultural shift. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Christensen?
Yes. Finally, I think people are becoming, over here and in my experience, a little more open about dealing with mental health, but it's always been treated with some degree of stigma. Just seeing a mental health professional or a counselor was also something people try to avoid and just try to deal with everything themselves, which really doesn't help. And one of the important things that you pointed out is that it doesn't just affect the person, it affects everything and everyone around them. Yeah. So
it is very network driven, very impactful, because it's almost like that rock that gets dropped into the lake, and you have a ripple effect, the degree to which you actually experience the impact of mental health. Obviously, as you're getting closer to those individuals, such as yourself, Dr. Sam, your family members, your mom, but then as they go out into society and they interact with other people, that gets shared. I often wondered how other countries and cultures are handling this subject around mental health. We have the perspective of the United States. We have celebrities and, princesses and princes and duchesses out there that are really elevating this, such as yourself, to a more global conversation, because we are so transient and because the internet has allowed us to peer into the homes of everyone. What do you see as some of the commonalities around what's happening in South Africa and maybe other parts of Africa, as well as Europe and the United States, North America?
So a month ago, I was in Washington, and I was having different conversation with different healthcare professionals. I was at the Black Caucus Congress, and I realized that we are all really struggling with some form of stress, some form of identity, some form of cultural, I think, burden or baggage that really makes us struggle to navigate and understand the challenges that we go through. So on that level, I think we all are experiencing the same things. It's just that the resources in America, of course, are not the resources we have back home. And when it comes to Africa particularly, I think we are still more so culturally indoctrinated that, we still live in so much oppression because we believe it's part of our culture. We live in so much hardship, and we believe it forms part of our identity of being strong. And we take on so many things because we think that's how we need to navigate. And in our country, more women have mental health problems than men.
Mm-hmm.
And in our country, it's because of the cultural background that we bring, that a woman should do this, a woman should tolerate such behaviors, a woman should, that it really impacts on how you navigate life. Trauma has such a detrimental effect on your brain, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're from any other culture. And once the brain is affected, you really struggle to behave in a certain way. Once trauma affects the brain, there's a certain way now that you won't be responding to emotional things. You won't be responding, even your thought processes, your memory, all those areas are affected. And once that happens in our country, I think we really start thinking there should be some voodoo that's involved. There should be. So for us, I think it goes really to the extremes where even it affects, that's why I said even the church community, it affects your faith, it affects your spirituality, how you view it, how you maybe even withdraw from it, or how you navigate. So on that level, I think we're completely different. But when it comes to more the corporate, more affluent, we're really experiencing the same things and the same burnout, the same wanting to identify and be successful, but there's pressure. In that level, we're really the same as any other, I think, first world country.
Well, all that you said about the stresses and the trauma and the dealing with the oppression and the different kinds of trauma that we're faced with is something that we experience as your brothers and sisters on this side of the Atlantic. And so it's not that different. And the thing about us, how we deal with it, it come up in several other conversations because we try to be so resilient and we try to just cope with it instead of facing it, confronting it. And it is hurting us not only mentally, but physically. Yeah, so there's not much difference if you look at the African American community. And I'm glad to hear you at the CBC. I didn't know you were there.
No.
Well,
and it brings to mind, Dr. Christensen, something that's distinctive, and it's really appreciating that global culture commonality. But then you also ask yourself, as an American or African American, we have a certain amount of racial, trauma from racial oppression. And I wonder if that's akin to the oppression of apartheid and over the years and generation, and the ongoing economic impact of actually having apartheid lifted, which was appropriate and important that happened. But there's been some economic impacts, as I understand and studied, and saw when I had a chance to tour, Johannesburg and Cape Town, Sun City, and points in between. So that brings to mind the education. How is this being elevated to an awareness? Because I think sometimes it's just a pure denial. You don't even know that this trauma is impacting your brain. I mean, like physically, you just said something that was so important for our listeners and our viewers to understand. There's a physical impact of trauma. It's not just I feel this way and now I'm better. Some genetic, there's some physiological
Yes,
shifts and changes
absolutely.
that continue on. How are you helping to raise awareness within country? Because that's a big
Um,
lift, I would imagine.
I think it's a really big struggle in our country. And I think the awareness is really targeted at people who can afford treatment, people who will know they'll go to a therapist. Yet in our country, there's still a lot of people who don't have those resources. I mean, we have an unemployment rate of 54%. That will really speak to you of how many people really are already in a traumatic environment, in an environment which is actually enabling them to have some form of mental health. So I think when it comes to our country, nationally, our government has really focused on the affluent people, people who are corporates, people who have jobs, who really be able to use the resources and go to a therapist. But I think from my foundational organization, that's where we had targeted to train every person in church, or every church leader, every community leader, every household that we can touch, so that they can understand and know how to navigate and where to even get resources. And one of the greatest things that we do is using the cell phone. There's so many apps online that really help and educate. So once we're doing the awareness in especially impoverished communities, we really connect them to these apps, because some of the community centres will have internet access. So even though it's limited, but it's doing its impact, and it's making the noise that will attract the government to even start doing something. And I remember when we started a couple of years ago, no one really could understand what we're trying to achieve. But that's where we were really looking, why are the young people getting impregnated? Why are the young people not going to school? Why are the young people really struggling in the community setups? What's happening in their families? What's happening to the only breadwinner that's within that household? What's the pressure looking like, and what's the impact of that? And once we started navigating and having the numbers and what's happening, I think government was really willing to say, let's do something. So in community centers, they're really starting to educate, even if it's not that in depth, but it's getting the conversation going.
That's outstanding.
I know that, and I haven't heard much about it lately, but there was a lot of emphasis from the agency that deals with mental health and substance abuse here in the United States on mental health first aid. Yes. And things like that. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about as well, so that people are aware and know not only how to identify it, but perhaps where the resources are. So you think that the government, even here, we feel like we don't have enough resources. And that's, because the problem we knew that it was going to grow during COVID, but it's been there under the surface all along and not being addressed. So,
and I actually think it's growing. I actually think our political winds that blow here, and our connection to the broader global community, and our mindfulness of what's happening in other cultures. We're not divorced from that. We're not just, let's just focus on us. This pandemic did level the playing field in that regard. And so when we come back from the break, we're going to take a break. Let's talk, Donna, a little bit about your experience as chairperson of the Healthcare Brain Trust here, and talk about that government response, Dr. Sam. Critical conversations that we have to have. We'll be right back after this break. This is the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle Program with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen, and our wonderful guest from South Africa, Dr. Sam.
next year I went back, I ended up winning and became got the Marvin Sims Award, which is like the best diverse actor. And they called my name, and as I walked to the stage, white kids was throwing books at me. Real talk, right off the top of the balcony, like, because this black boy won.
And then finally, one day I was just cooking in the kitchen and she was like, "Mommy, so-and-so touched me on my private parts like this," you know? And it was that moment where, like, I had that moment where I told my mom, and my mom was the one that shut me down, and I had a choice, you know, to make.
I shot back. But you can't claim self-defense when you got an illegal firearm and you're 16 years old.
I remember my brother right here, he was selling, he was doing this, but he got a break. He could have took that money and flipped it. He could have went back, Wake and Wire money, 17 episodes. I could flip that.
Even on the out there, I did not flip. He didn't flip the wire, but I went straight. My bad, I'm moving on.
I was a single friend for 6.5 years, and I was going through my situationships, y'all know the situationships, men. Then I found, just like for myself, again, like, oh girl, you still recovering from your childhood. Like, what you about to do with a man right now?
I had an agent, sometimes some years after that, tell me that if you don't do nudity, you're not a real actress.
So did they get fired? So that's
should have gotten fired that way.
Everybody's laughing. They're like, oh my God. They go, okay, great. Are you SAG? I was like, nah, I'm Puerto Rican and black.
And everybody did that.
Like, we can pick up the sides right now and start going. I know this group that I'm with is about that. We're about that. Like, I'm about the work. You know what I mean? Like,
chasing Hollywood industry. Who chasing?
So I saw Chasing Hollywood. I was like, yo, we don't have to change that name and do something because niggas don't own chase.
I feel like we're living. That's the term that Hollywood uses.
It's not about just today, me, and blah, blah, blah. What we are doing is being documented. Our grandkids, our great-great-grandkids can see how we all walk, talk, sound, look in our prime. And, something about that is very beautiful. And I think that is another element that kind of attracted me to it, is that it never dies. You never die through this art form.
Well, welcome back. We are glad to have you here on Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen. And we're here with Dr. Sam from South Africa talking about all things mental wealth. I love that title versus mental health. But we're going to get into that in just a moment. We want to talk about the foundation. We want to talk about your book. We want to talk about next steps on how individuals can get a hold of you and how can we be proactive in supporting your work there and work that is similar around the globe. But Dr. Christensen, you bring so much wealth yourself to the conversation. Tell us a little bit about what it's meant to be in the leadership role as chairperson of the Healthcare Brain.
Yeah, well, it gave me an opportunity to begin to bring some attention to mental health issues and dealing with the whole person. You talked about, Dr. Sam, you talk about body and spirit and soul. It's all one, and you can't just deal with your physical health and forget the rest. And so we did a number of sessions just on mental health itself and behavioral problems, suicide, and other issues. And others, we had one session where we talked about the impact of chronic disease on mental health, because chronic pain, diabetes, dealing with having to change your diet, all of those things create stress as well. But I think there's a much more attention being paid now to the racial tensions. And I expect that there's a lot more anxiety, and I noticed that CDC is called attention to anxiety, but there's a lot of it. I'm anxious about what is going to happen in this country, and that's stress in itself. You're afraid to walk out. You're afraid to go to the movies. You're afraid to send your children to school. It's crazy. So I expect that we're all going to have to pay more attention to our mental health. I'm interested in something that you said, Dr. Sam, about investing. How do you invest when you talk about investing in your spiritual and health and in your spirit and your soul? How do you invest? How do you invest in that? Because I think it's very important.
I think that is very important too. I think the theory behind it is just to create a lifestyle of a certain type of way. How do you cope? How do you manage anger? How do you navigate life? How is your day? How do you raise your own children? Remember, when you look at mental health and you look at how we diagnose it on the DSM-4 or 5, there's a factor which speaks about your childhood bringing, your socioeconomic, your occupation, your family life. So investing is to make sure or ensure that you're actually intentional about how you're being raised or how you raised your own children, how you have relationships, how you navigate life, how you equip yourself to cope with anger, to cope with change, to cope with distress. How do you equip yourself when you move to another country, to another place and start a new job? So investing in it is knowing that already in the world we live in, challenges will come, but how do you best prepare for them? How do you best prepare mentally? How do you best prepare emotionally? How do you best prepare holistically for the things that will happen inevitably? Not because you're a bad person or a good person, but these things will happen. But how do you then, strategically, even when you're raising your own child, how do you prepare that child for the world we live in? So you create an environment for this child to already start investing. Remember, the experiences that we have, the memories that we have inform or shape how we see the world before us. So if we're going to intentionally and purposefully, be aware that these things are happening and they probe or impose or influence the future, we're going to be strategic. We're going to be holistic about it. We're going to be purposeful. We're going to learn how to actually declutter and, replenish ourselves. It's going to be part of our lives. There was a point where we thought, health in itself, people going to gym, eating healthy was just, such a far-fetched idea in Africa. But now each and every person is talking about their health. So what if we invested in our mental health that way? And remember, mental health is not just your mind or your brain. It's everything. It's the way you think, what informs your thought, what informs your behavior in those thought patterns, what informs your emotions. Why do you have certain emotions and why do you respond a certain way? What will equip you to respond in a better way, to be a better citizen in the country? And what are the behaviors? What informs our behaviors? So if we know what informs them, it means we'll also know what the good behaviors and what informs the good behaviors or progressive behaviors. So that's what we mean when we say investing in your mental health.
And is that
holistic approach?
I need to applaud you on that one. Just give you applause because that is so rich in that content. Because the investment, just like you said, Donna, is so critical that we not self-diagnose, but that we become so aware that we can go through a serious checklist and ask even if we are in denial, are we recognizing that we are actually in some type of mental health state, whether it's emotional, whether it's anxiety on the least, if you will, spectrum, all the way up to the tendencies of schizophrenia and everything in between that will impact on our decision making, on how we plan and execute our lives, and then we impact other people around us with what we say and do and feel. That is so rich because it reminds me the fact that we should have a mental health check. There should be, we get a license for our cars, we get a license to get married, we have to go through a checkup to get certain insurances. What are we missing in the mental health piece that's not a part of all of that process that should now, radically maybe be included? I mean, like seriously, you get your license, but have you had a mental health? Is there any testing, as an example? Is there any crosswalk into you getting married? We do genetic testing for sickle cell. Maybe we should do some genetic testing for mental health. What's missing in all these facets that would be so, that would really proliferate, if you will, through our society in a much more holistic way, less stigmatized?
I'll speak from the South African context. I think what we've really missed is the basic things that, were done before. So, for example, if someone's dating someone from another family, parents will ask, what kind of family is he from? What's in that family? What do they do in that family? Which I think in this generation seems as if you're being so shallow, or you're being so, you can't ask those things. But that type of information informs what already exists in that family. What I always say is that when you know a family has a certain type of behavior and pattern, when you go into that family, it's more likely that you'll end up doing those patterns because they'll overpower you. It's natural for them to act that way. So they'll overpower your thinking, they'll overpower the way you do things. Are you prepared to go in that family? So I think from our context, it's really the simple, normal things that you generally ask. What type of friends do you have? Why are they that way? If you want to be their friends, how do you help them and support them to become better? Do they want to become better when they have the information that you're giving them? So it's such things that's really making the mental health aspect in our country, be put under the carpet, or we miss it. Even when we go into work, in our corporate work, we really want the degree, we really want the experience, but no one's really looking at the emotional intelligence. How does this person navigate? What kind of family do they come from? And another thing that we always really just shy away from when we look at women in empowerment and mental health issues is when women go into families and they get married and they have children, the transition there. What's the impact of that on that woman who's a corporate woman? How will it influence? How will it impact this woman when she's working? How will this influence this woman in raising the children now that she's in a family that's like this? All those things are not looked. Does this person have a spiritual home or spiritual routine that supports them? All those things are part of mental health, like how Dr. Donna said, that it's all in one. You cannot separate it, but we never look at it. We really look at, do you have the papers? Do you have the qualification? Do you have experience? But we're not looking, what's your story like? What happened to your family? What do you bring? And we know will position you to advocate for people who've gone through that in our workplace, who've gone through that in our families, who've gone through that in our culture or church or faith-based organization. So I think we're just missing the simple things that are really hidden in bare, sides. And we just carrying on and thinking this is the new age, and we don't realize the repercussion of all these pressures, of all the information that we're getting, and we become anxious because now we know more. We become so timid sometimes because now we feel paralyzed. And we really not equipping ourselves on how to say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to be, digging deep in this. This is how I want to navigate life. This is how I want to see my life, become. And also just creating support structures. What does support look like for a pregnant woman in a corporate setting? What does a support structure look like for a pregnant woman in a church and faith-based organization? What does a pregnant woman as a senator? Do they even get pregnant? I've never heard of a senator being pregnant.
We've had some.
Yes, but what's the support like when they have to campaign and go voting? All those things that will end up making us say things like women are not strong enough, women are not equipped enough. Have we looked at the environment that is pressing the woman's ability to function?
Do you think, as you talk, and you mentioned asking about the family, we always had a way of asking, who's your mother, who's your father, and I still do it sometimes, but it's the modern life part of the problem. There was a time when families were more extended. Now they're more nuclear. Now people are more isolated. People are on their machines. They don't social. Is the modern life part of the problem?
I like to say modern life. What comes to mind for me is social media. I have two teenagers, right smack in the dab of the conversations around the impact and influences of social media and that modern life, incorporate that's modern life. So that I just wanted to add that into your thoughts as you're responding, Dr. Sam.
Yeah, it's not as much emotional support, I don't think, as there used to be. But go ahead.
Yes, I think, well, you can put it as modern because it's different than what was before. And remember, once someone has heard something or has seen something, it's really hard to erase that from a person. So the information that we're getting through social media, through so much knowledge that's around, we are not preparing ourselves that now that we've heard this, how do we navigate? How do we create a safe space in our minds, in our bodies, spiritually, to still navigate this same world that now has exposed so much information? And I really do think the modern way of doing things requires us to really dig deep on how we navigate this kind of life. And certain things that were done before, they're still relevant. Like how I'm saying, asking, what's your family like? But, in this day and age, we think that's not necessary. I'm going where I'm going. But it really is. It informs how they'll respond when you're with them. It will inform what's the natural thing for them to do, as opposed to learning new behaviors. A person always goes to what they've known, what they've seen, what they've lived doing all their lives.
Well, tell us, that is so true. It sounds so simple and simplistic, but it's so complex and compounded because there's so many different compounding issues that navigating this new life is such a brilliant way of thinking about it, that we're navigating through the plethora of information that's coming, bombarding us, and imagery that's bombarding us, the music that's bombarding us, and we just sometimes don't have any clue as to where that's actually coming from. Tell us a little bit about the Mental Wealth Foundation. I think it's always admirable when you take your work and you seek to do things that support those who are most disenfranchised. Dr. Sam, can you share with us a little bit about that, your foundation?
The foundation is really focused at the marginalized groups. And initially, it was really looking at the church space, because that's where I found that in our country, a lot of people are going for support. But when it comes to the churches, what does the support look like for families who've had someone commit suicide? In our stats, it revealed that only 16% of our whole national churches within our country really know what even mental health is. So it means that they don't have a way or management mechanism that's going to help these families. So initially, the foundation was really looking at faith-based organization because that's the bigger, group, and teaching and educating the leaders there so that they can address and help these people. And then it moved on to the more impoverished communities where they might not have access to a therapist, might not have access in that clinic or hospital settings to any psychologist, to any counseling. And how do we train caregivers or care workers there, or even any form of healthcare worker to be equipped to address such things, because they exist more even in the impoverished areas. And then it grew from that to schools. What does our school system look like? Why are our children not performing as we'd hope to? What does the support structure that will enable them to have clear minds and function at school look like? And also looking at the social determinants of health that affect mental health within the school system. And from the school system, and then it was the colleges and the universities. When children leave their native cities or rural areas and go to a bigger environment, there's already a pressure and demand to succeed. Yet these children might not necessarily be exposed to these big numbers of people, this big competition that now has been pressed upon them. And how do we support them and create allies within the system, with their education system, that's going to also focus spiritually, mentally, physically, socially, and the environment to enable them to thrive. So I think the organization is really growing, and a lot of people are partnering us from government, to public schools, private schools, churches as well, to make it known that, people can thrive, people can live lives which are meaningful, even with mental illness, even when you feel like you have compromised your mental health, and how even to thrive and prevent such things happening. Some of the mental illnesses really come from patterns that we've learned from our families, from people. If you grew up someone shouting at you to get your attention, that's probably what you're going to do even at work, when they push you hard enough. And also identifying those things. How do we create relationships that are meaningful and having hard conversations that will make everyone thrive regardless of the pressure that's pressed upon them? I've said a lot.
No. You've said more than no. We can listen to you all afternoon, and so I'm excited that you're going to actually have this show that's going to do a deep dive on mental health. But I love the terminology mental wealth, that we're gaining something that is of significant value that we can pass from generation to generation, because that our wealth fit financially is passed on. So I love that commonality with mental health. So kudos for that creativity. Kudos. Tell us a little bit about your book, and then let's talk about your program. But I know, Donna, you had a question?
Just really quickly, I wonder if the younger generation is a little different and more open to talking about mental health. I went to a women's conference here recently, and there was a panel of about 5 young women, like 30-ish. And every one of them advised that people should see a therapist. Most of them were already in therapy. They were already with a therapist, and they thought that it was so valuable to them that they were really advising everybody, that we should all have some form of therapy at some point in our lives. So I was really surprised at that. So are you seeing young people more open to talking about mental health and seeking counseling? Or is it the same?
I think in our country, it's probably 50-50. You have people that really advocate for having a therapist and going through, but then you'll have those that say, I don't really need one because of my spiritual or faith that I believe in. So I think it's dependent, and that's why the first stop was the church, to educate the church and, to speak more, to say, and that's why, I think that's where the topic came. When I said mental wealth, and it was in a church environment, everyone really wanted to hear, because I know we speak about generational wealth, so it means even in our minds there's wealth. So I think it's really 50% and 50% in our country. And when it comes to other areas where it's really culturally based and spiritually based, you find that they're more open to group therapy. And by that, I mean, you're not going to go there and saying you're a therapist and you're doing group therapy. You're addressing issues that exist in society. So we'll come in and say, we're looking at child pregnancy. What's the support that's created? And then from those conversations, you will hear certain things that are leading to the mental health illnesses or compromise of mental health. And that's why we have something called mental wealth conversations. And through the mental wealth conversations, really, it is called therapy, whether it's through support, it's through group therapy. But the moment I found that we call it mental wealth conversations, everyone wants to be part of it because everyone wants to add into the wealth and, reclaim the wealth. So I think for our country, I really had to research and dig deep and see how we communicate and how people really receive communication. And once you're in there, that's where people start trusting you and they're more open now to having therapy. And then you'll find even pastors, you'll find even faith-based leaders or traditional leaders saying, please come into our organization and share more on how we can actually contribute. Because you remember, when you're looking at these type of entities, you're looking at family, you're looking at faith, you're looking at community of people. And once you address the issues that exist within those community, they really see the essence of how their mental health has been impacted. And one of the things that I always really drive from, is that mental health has to do with the way you think, your feelings or emotions, and your behavior. And everyone has a way of thinking, everyone has emotions, everyone behaves in a certain way. So it's not just for people who are in hospitals, psychiatric hospitals. What's the state of your thought pattern? What does it look like? What's the state of your emotions? What does that look like? What are your behaviors? So if you want to change a person, you need to look at the area that they'll really resonate with and want to change. Everyone wants to move from poverty to wealth. And once you tackle that, people are more open. People will start telling you about the challenges that they have and their mother who's struggling, who's probably on drugs or whatever the case may be. And then it starts the mental wealth conversation, and everyone's going around hashtagging and not looking at it as just illness or psychotism. So, yeah.
And you know, and our producer just put something in our chat, which I think is part of is one slice of the social determinants of mental health, and that is the fact that we do have homeless populations around the world. And of course, we know that in the U.S. we have many metropolitan cities that are not able to hold those individuals in facilities, and you find them out on the street. L.A. as a community, Los Angeles, California, has whole neighborhoods, whole streets where that is the case. Doing as much formative work, and I'm sure that's happening across the globe, and of course in South Africa would be no exception. How is homelessness in South Africa as a result? And then I want to make sure that we get repeat the name of the book, because we can all go to Amazon or wherever you have your book, and let's get that book and support you, and then a website where individuals can learn more about your work.
Okay, so the website, you can get the book on the website as well, www.mentalwealthfoundation.com. So you get everything, the book, our work we're doing, you can get in touch with us. And yes, that's the platform where you can get in touch with us. And when it comes to homelessness in South Africa, there's so much, part of people's dignity is really stripped away. And I follow this homeless Instagram page, which is based in America. And I was really comparing those homeless people in America to our homeless people. Our homeless people, literally all of them look dirty. They have no places to bath. They have no food. And then you look at America, that some of them are educated people. And here, most of them, they come from families where they were chased away or they ran away because there was some form of abuse. I mean, those stories are probably the same even in America, but sometimes in America you find that people will not afford to keep a home. But I think the effect of that is really not having a support structure. So you feel like you're isolated in a world filled with people. There's a lot of loss there. There's a lot of death that you experience. I mean, it's as if everyone has died around you, and you start really asking questions, what am I living for? So there's a high suicide rate in our homeless people. And they really abuse drugs, they abuse alcohol, they have lots of sicknesses that sometimes we find them dead in the streets. So it's really a huge burden, I think, in our healthcare system. And our government is probably, trying to find ways to help and sort and solve the solution. But I think we're struggling also to create homes or safe spaces where they can go get food, basic needs, to keep someone alive. So it's a huge problem. And initially, before COVID, the church was really playing a huge role in ensuring that these people have some form of support or home or meal or skills development even. But post-COVID, even the churches can't really, support those people. So homelessness does really affect your mental health, your physical health. It affects even, your faith. What do you believe in when you're in the streets? Who do you go to when you're in the streets? So, yeah, it makes them lose a sense of who they are, a sense of being. I mean, it goes beyond just losing your worth or value or your value chain in the system. You lose everything. You lose even believing there's a God, But I can go on, but yeah, it's one of the major challenges we are facing in our country.
We know that the agenda and conversation is so rich and so deep and so complex that we are just so pleased that you'll be on our TV.network with your own show. Do we have a name yet for that show so we can have
the Mental Wealth Show?
The Mental Wealth Show. There it is with Dr. Sam. Week 2. We're glad to announce it here on Health,
Yes.
Wellness, and Lifestyle with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen. And welcome aboard to the family to talk
Thank you so
about
much.
health issues. We are just so pleased that you're with us today, Dr. Sam. We applaud your work. We lift up your work. We pray for
Thank
the
you so
continued
much.
success of that work and the financial resources to continue. So
Mhm.
everyone, you want to support mentalwealthfoundation.com or .org? It's
.com.
.com.
Yeah.
Mentalwealthfoundation.com. You can buy
Yeah.
Mental Wealth by Dr. Sam, learn more about that work, and really become a supporter. Make that investment in what's happening to those around the world. We're all interconnected one way or the other. I actually think we're over time, and I'm not
Okay.
sad about that, but you know, what can we say before we get snagged? This is the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen on today's program. We welcome Dr. Sam. Continue to listen to the next program on RTV.network and listen in at WSTX Bloomberg Radio out of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to
Yes.
tuning into your program. And
Thank
listening.
you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.